So there's that. Don't die of cirrhosis.
Public service announcement.
Yeah, PSA, don't go into liver failure. All right.
Keep the bottle down.
All right, welcome back, guys. We're going to kind of trail from our last video into this one. Last one we ended on a note of battling some imposter syndrome, so I figured to be a good subject to kind of jump into, especially for people that are entrepreneurs or successful in some facet. I know that there's a very common occurrence of imposter syndrome, and I've struggled with it a lot in my life, so I've done a lot of research on the things that predispose the levels of imposter syndrome, where they come from, how to solve them, how to overcome some of the things that you struggle with imposter syndrome. So the general definition of imposter syndrome is a person struggling from one of these three things. The first one is that thinking that people have an exaggerated view of your abilities. Two is the fear of being exposed as a fraud. And three, the continuous tendency to downplay your own personal achievements. So, you guys don't know a lot of my story, but I'm in recovery. I've been clean and sober for about a little over 14 years. A lot of the imposter syndrome tendencies for me showed up in that, I would say, chapter 2 of my life, which is kind of getting into recovery. I always like to say that I've 2 lives, pre and post recovery. Because pre-recovery I was generally useless. I think that
maybe genuinely.
Yeah, but also generally.
Yeah.
I took up a lot of oxygen for not a lot of reason in the world, and I felt as if I got a late start in life, you could say, even though I got sober when I was 20. I felt like I didn't have the same skill sets or opportunities that my fellow peers had, but which was 100% due to my own choices, right? But I felt like if I was to be successful in anything, then, I was kind of constantly overlooking my shoulder and thinking that people would be like, well, did you know that he was really this? Mm-hmm. And it's, like it says, being exposed as a fraud. And then the third definition of a continuous tendency to downplay your own achievements is a stronger one for me, in the sense that boils down to, in my research and experience, a compromised or fractured self-esteem, right? Or self-worth, which also directly coincides to the type of behavior that I distributed, or type of behavior that I acted upon prior to that, big life change for me. So which one of those three do you identify most with?
Well, all of them, but the third one more than any of them, for sure. But mine is a little bit different. I wouldn't say that it's pre and post recovery. Mine is a deep-seated kind of childhood trauma, mm-hmm. for sure, that just kind of resonates in everything that I do. Mm-hmm. Without going into too much detail or making it sound like it was worse than it is, I'm a product of a family of 4 children. My dad had many times, I remember in my childhood, would have 3 to 4 different jobs simultaneously, getting home from one, sleeping for 30 minutes, going to another one, working all night, that type of stuff. And what I kind of took a belief on in my own head, it wasn't necessarily ever just said to me this way, it's just what I felt like because mm-hmm. of the amount of stress that I saw my parents inside of. But it felt as though it was a little bit of like a straw that broke the camel's back in terms of just me being there, I think it was manageable with 2 kids, and then 3 kids made things really difficult. It wasn't like my parents were doctors and really well off. These were 4 jobs of like, I remember one job was bundling papers, and the papers mm-hmm. had to be delivered. They would have to be bundled first in like sets of like 20 to 50, depending on which newspaper that it is. And his job was to stack them and get them ready for the delivery so that the paper boys could take them and wrap them and throw them and all that other stuff. And then it was night stocking shelves at Safeway and, all sorts of miscellaneous little things. But anyways, I felt as though I was a little bit of a accident, right? Like maybe not an accident, but I was maybe something that caused more stress.
A burden,
right? Like I said, not something that was ever really just said, this. It's just what I kind of thought as a child. And that has changed my demeanor for the entirety of my life, because it's stuck in my head, this idea that I was not supposed to be there. So everything that I've done since then, I've kind of felt that exact same feeling. Like I wasn't supposed to be there, right? And so a lot of the things that I've done in terms of accomplishments, I was actually talking in a more vulnerable type of conversation with my wife over the weekend about imposter syndrome, knowing that we were going to be talking about this. And it's an interesting thing that, you look at my resume, and I've done a lot of pretty cool things in my life, start to finish, regardless of what time or era it was, high school, college, after college, professional career stuff, whatever. There's been a lot of things that you should probably be pretty proud of, right? And I don't think that I've ever actually been very proud of each one of them. In fact, each time I felt like I got there by accident, and I felt like it's been more of a, and I immediately turned from like that celebratory thought that most people would have, like, yes, you did it, to that's not quite good enough, let's find another thing. Right? It's not quite good enough, you haven't earned the right to be here yet. So when you say, downplaying accomplishments, very much so. It doesn't really matter how good things really look to the outside world to me, that they just haven't been good enough.
Right. So I had a interesting. This was fairly recent for me, probably 6 weeks ago. I had a conversation with a professional that I speak to about some of these things, and kind of what you alluded to was, and this is why after we filmed last week, I pointed it out to you, was that the things that I felt like I was improving upon, because like I told the psychologist that I see, I was like, I've never really been able to identify the feeling of being proud of myself, right? Because it's almost like I eliminate my ability to feel proud of myself, because if I feel proud of myself, then that will mean that I did something right, right? And that doesn't coincide with the narrative in my head. Like those two don't have a good relationship. So mine is similar, of the feeling of being a burden, right, or feeling of less value. But it was that small thing I brought up to you last week. I was like, I kind of feel proud of myself, right? I was like, this is really weird.
Yeah.
This is a very weird feeling, first off. Second off, and then my dialogue in my head was like, if I bring this up to Christian, am I gloating? Right? Like, am I bragging about this now? Am I arrogant?
Yeah. It's become kind of taboo.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that feeling or that sense of accomplishment, when you have that source of self-pride in a good way, in a non-arrogant way, is a cornerstone or crucial of development of self-esteem, right, and self-worth, which is something I focus heavily on with my daughter now. But the feeling of accomplishment, and then understanding that the work you did was why you got to here. So hopefully I can combat, her having to deal with similar imposter syndrome in some facet. But it's an underlying trend that I see in most people that are successful, that are like, to me, it almost feels like they keep moving the target or the goalpost, so that they don't ever feel done.
Yeah, and there's another layer to that too. I guess I didn't even mention, like, when you get to the initial target like that, where you should feel proud, generally get an overwhelming sense of fear.
Yeah.
Right? An overwhelming sense of fear that it's about to be taken away. And so if I'm not sitting, ruminating or thinking or analyzing how I got here, and I'm just focused on how I'm going to get to the next place, I don't leave enough time for a gap and
Right.
for things to ultimately be destroyed somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's kind of I don't know. It's hard to put it all into words, but there is like an instantaneous, like, oh shit, this is about to be taken away. I got to find something else to look at so I can stay focused on it, and I'm not thinking about the good
Right.
stuff,
It's interesting. I had a similar conversation with my psychologist about something similar to you and your wife, of like the things that the quote unquote accomplishments on paper, right? That I've been able to achieve, in my 34 years of life. And I read them and I almost feel nothing. Like to me, it's like, right? Like it, And he asked me, he said, so what do you need to accomplish to feel proud of yourself? And I was like, I have no idea. I genuinely have no idea. If I raise a level-headed child that is beneficial to the population of the world, does her part, and is, honest and sincere and loving and caring, I feel like I'll be proud of that, right? But for me, that's external to me, right? But for me, I was like, I jokingly said to him, like, if I make it, and he was like, if you make what? And I was like, I guess if I just make it, like through life,
Yeah.
and then, I'm comfortable, and then die, right? And he was like, that sounds pretty miserable. And I was like, that does sound pretty morbid, right? But it's like, it's almost like a never-ending goal, right? So it's like, let's say your business goal is to get to 10 million, and you get to 10, and you're like, oh, that was easier than I thought. And then it's 50, and you get to 50, and then you're like, oh, that was easier than I thought. And then you get to, like, when does that stop moving? Right? And is that part of what separates entrepreneurs from other people? Is almost a level of being unable to be satisfied?
Yeah, is it a superpower, or is it like a
Detriment.
detriment? Yeah.
Right. Well, we definitely lack balance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's 6 types of imposter syndrome. I'm curious to hear yours, or what you think yours is. There's the perfectionist, the superhero, the natural genius, or 5, I should say, the soloist, and the expert. The perfectionist sets excessively high goals for themselves. When they fail to reach goals, they experience major self-doubt, worry, and measuring up. This group can also be control freaks, feeling like if they want to do something, or if they want something done right, they have to do it themselves and only themselves always. The superhero is, since these people who experience this phenomenon are convinced that they're phonies amongst real deal colleagues, right? This is such horrible writing. They often push themselves to work harder to measure up. In turn, working usually 150 to 200% harder to cover up their own insecurities and self-doubt, despite the work overload and deterioration of their mental health and relationships with others. Right? The natural genius sets their internal bar impossibly high, just like the perfectionist, but the natural genius types don't just judge themselves based on ridiculous expectations, but they also judge themselves based on getting things right the first try. Right? When they're not able to do something quickly or fluently, their alarms go off in their head. 4th is the soloist. Is someone, in simplest form, is somebody who literally cannot or will not ask for help. Right? They're okay being independent, especially in tasks where they can't be independent. And then the expert is, they measure their competence based on what and how much they know or can do. Believing that they will never know enough, and they fear being exposed as inexperienced or unknowledgeable. in my previous field, that was me. Right? So like one of the things it says is, are you constantly seeking out trainings or certifications because you think that you need more skill sets rather than mastering the skill sets you have? Right? Which one do you think you identify with?
All of them have some pretty resonating words in them, but the superhero more than anything else, absolutely. It's almost to a T exactly what's going on inside my head. It's very much, well, I mean, let's break it down to where I sit with Pride Roofing and Construction. So for those of you guys who haven't tuned into all of our videos, and you know this, but I'll just review it. You know, I never studied to be in construction.
Right.
You know, I didn't go to school for it. I wasn't born into a construction household. It wasn't like my dad had me swinging hammers from the age of 5, you know, like a couple of guys on the team.
Yep.
You know, I wanted to be a doctor, right? Or at least I thought I wanted to be a doctor until I had an opportunity to be a doctor, and then I chose not to work in a gym, you know, so that's
Close enough.
Another story. Another story for another day, I suppose. But if you really look at it, like that resume of things that I've done, they all look great, but they're completely unapplicable to what I do right now. Right. Other than the skill sets that I learned in those, you know, different jobs, titles, and stuff like that, like the sales and the communication and overall understanding of how a business works, you know, how it functions, different models of business, stuff like that. I learned a lot of those things along the way, but you know, I'm about the least capable, personally, construction worker that I know. Not really. I know quite a few things, but in my mind, I'm very incapable in comparison to the people that I employ and the people that I bring in to help and stuff like that. So there's that, and then there's the other part of it where, you know, this industry that we're in is completely foreign, or at least was completely foreign until I jumped off the cliff and you know, I guess not necessarily the second cliff, but left the gym world that was comfortable, and I understood it because that had everything to do with what I was studying. It's physiology, it's biology, it's biomechanics, it's X, Y, and Z, right? And so when I look at this field, I feel as though I have to perform constantly. I have to work 5 times harder just so nobody sees that weakness that I have is that personal lack, I guess, of the construction part of the business doesn't get exposed. Right. I feel like I have to work harder. But you know what I'm learning in becoming more and more, I guess, comfortable with is that as long as I continue to focus where I need to focus, which is knowing what those weaknesses are and recruiting directly for those weaknesses so that I have a team of people who can fill in my gaps, as long as I can stay confident with you know, taking my hands off the wheel with those things and letting their experiences do their thing, I'm comfortable with the position that I'm in. But at the same time, it's still in the back of my head. So I still have to be like, for instance, I drop my children off at school every day. I volunteered to do that so that it took a little bit of the burden off of my wife's back. And that means that I won't be into the office until 8:15. Well, everybody knows construction starts as soon as the sun's out, right? And so, like, the fact that I'm not walking through the doors until 8:15 makes me feel like I'm doing something wrong. I mean, I own this place. I could walk in whenever the hell I wanted and walk out whenever the hell I wanted, but I have this, like, internal dialogue that you're fucking up in front of these people. You know, maybe cut the F word out, but you're screwing up in front of these people. They're going to find out you're a phony. You know, you're not working hard enough. You're not showing the right example. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. And I'm battling that demon every single day that I walk in, regardless of how efficient I am at the job that I do. I probably could get 12 hours of a normal person's work done in a 4-hour time span because I just understand how to do it with more efficiency. But at the same time, it's not like that thought is gone. So I'm working the whole time. I don't leave early. I don't come any later than I have to. You know, and it's like, and it does exactly what the description shows. It leads to, well, creating problems in all of your relationships because there's no balance. It's you know, if my friends and family are watching this, maybe it helps them understand a little bit. But I'm not the guy that's like leading group chats and checking in on people. I'm not making phone calls here and there. You know, and you know, at home, you know, when I'm at home with the family, I'm at home with the family. When I'm gone, it's like I'm not it's like I have two lives,
Right.
you know, and it's difficult to have a relationship that is thriving and getting people involved with that because I'm stuck in this dialogue inside my head all the time. So super, whatever it was.
Superhero?
Superhero is 100% it.
Yeah. When you mentioned that to me a few weeks ago of like, you know, rolling at 8:15, you're like, I wonder what everybody else is thinking.
Right.
Where's Christian?
Yeah.
Was he messing around? Like, what's he?
Yeah.
The funny thing is like, I don't think anybody even thinks about where you are, which is the wild part.
Yeah.
Right. So like, which reminds me of I remember the first few meetings I went to. I told one of my mentors at the time, I was like, every time I walk into one of these meetings, I was like, I'm kind of overwhelmed because there's 50 or 70 people in here. I feel like everybody's staring at me. I feel like, you know, I've got something on my face or, you know, and he goes, everybody in this room is so self-absorbed, they're thinking about themselves. Right? He said 99% of people are not thinking about you walking in the door or looking a certain way or whatever it is other than you. Right.
Well, I think that's where when I said narcissistic, I think that's where that really comes from, because I understand that. I just can't actually absorb that. You know what I mean?
So I don't love the flippancy in which you use the word narcissist. What you're referring to, in my opinion, is ego, right? So it's, you know, the purest definition of ego is thinking that the world revolves around you, more or less, right? So that, and everybody should do what you want to do because you're the most important person, right? So narcissism is, I'm going to hurt you, I'm not going to feel anything about hurting you, and I'm going to expect you to act the way I want you to act, even though I'm hurting you, right? For my best interest, right? But I think that the imposter syndrome for me, like I remember 6-7 years into my gym running things, and I almost had like what I would call an early midlife crisis, right? Where I was talking to my ex-wife at the time, and I was overwhelmed with anxiety. I didn't understand why, right? And she was like, what's going on? And I was like, what if everybody finds out I have no idea what I'm doing? Right. And she was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I don't have any idea what I'm doing. She was like, you clearly have something to know with what you're doing, right? Because look at the results that these people have gotten, right? In the simplest format. I was like, yeah, but I don't know like how to manage employees. I don't know how to structure businesses. I feel like my business doesn't run perfect. When I look at every other business around me, I'm like, man, that business runs perfectly. Mine feels like chaos, right? Like I don't understand the overwhelming sense of what I feel I don't know is consuming me, right? And I feel like when I walk in, everybody can see it on my face, right? And she was like, the funny thing is when you walk in, everybody sees the opposite, right? So it's like, at what point do I feel like the amount of effort or work that I put in has an equal reward or an equal value to like, oh, I can do this, or I've demonstrated that I'm doing this, right? And it's going okay. Instead of the doomsday thinking constantly of like, the world's going to implode, everything's going wrong, I have no idea what I'm doing. Everybody's going to find out that I have no idea what I'm doing. And then what's going to happen to me? I'm going to be homeless and, you know, living on the side of the street somewhere, and I'll never be able to get a job again. Yeah. Right? Which is lunacy in your head.
It's bonkers, but it's there.
Right.
It's the way that I think every single day.
Right.
Right. Nobody. I mean, I think that they could read it on my face.
Right.
But evidently, nobody else knows that this is going on. Right. And so, you know, I think that one thing that I've started to understand that's made me a little bit more comfortable, where I'm not feeling quite as much anxiety, is understanding grounding. right? And I don't mean grounding like in terms of physiological grounding or like electricity. I'm talking
Metaphysics.
about like, I'm talking about like finding true purpose, finding true purpose in your life outside of your business, and understanding that there's more to it, and you're serving a higher purpose. So for instance, for me, things that keep me grounded are going to church, right, and staying active in reading scripture and evolving my relationship with God. Regardless of what readers or viewers or whoever's listening or feel, that's how I ground myself, because when I am understanding my relationship there, it makes me have a different sense of purpose while I'm here, right? It's like, I'm going to serve a new purpose. I'm going to serve these people with this side of myself, where it's, I'm going to help you professionally. If it's everybody's here, I'm going to help you. Let's raise the ships together,
right?
Instead of it's like, let's just focus on $20 million. Once we get to 20 million, I'm going to feel better. No, it's like, let's elevate everybody's life. Right. That's the focus. Those are the types of things that make me feel better, because I'm grounded in a different thought process, which is like, let's have a more positive effect on the world around us. And then I can relate that to family. And actually, it's funny that you said what you said about your time with your counselor, because mine's completely external as well. I don't feel as though I'm ever going to feel like successful or like that I've achieved something.
That you can take a breath.
But if my children turn out to be just good humans,
right,
then I will believe that I did something right. Right. And that's so far down in the future, like they're good kids now, but like, what are they, are they grounded themselves? Then that's going to make me feel a little bit different. So like, anyways, I got kind of sidetracked with it, but it's an interesting concept altogether when you feel like you're, an imposter, or you're sitting somewhere where you shouldn't be.
Right.
And nobody really knows what this battle is that's going on inside your head, but I sometimes I'll take a step back and I'll start to review and I'll start to think about things, and I'll remember the blood, or maybe not blood. There's a couple times I smashed my fingers, and stuff like that. But I'm just saying, like, the sweat equity that really went into it, and the amount of hours that I put in when all doing 200, 300% more work than people around me so that I could catch up. And I'm like, okay, I guess I have been doing something that earned me the position that I'm here. I guess there's a reason that nobody's, breathing down my neck trying to, mutiny, trying to take over, and that kind of stuff.
Right. So what other ways, before I share some of mine, have you, other than the grounding, if there are any, that you've used successfully, or you've seen improvement in the way that it's been summed up to me is that imposter syndrome is really just a constant loop of self-deprecation, right? So in what other ways, like I said, if any, have you seen success or noticed improvement?
Outside of grounding, I mean, I do certain exercises where I'm still trying to prove something to myself while I'm doing it, but I'll do certain.
This is like journaling. Like, I'm going to journal harder than anybody's ever journaled before.
No, but I'll do things like where I'll like purposefully give myself a hard out. Right. It's like, this is the time I'm leaving today, and I'm going to make it my stance today is that I'm going to choose myself over the things that consume me all the time, and I'm going to go work out. And then after this workout is over, I'm going to check in to what I would think would be some kind of trash can fire of crap that just went on because I wasn't there. And then I find out that nothing really bad even happened, right? It was irrelevant that I had all that stress in my, like, God forbid, I'm going to choose myself over things, and then I find out, hey, everything worked out, and it makes me feel a little bit more confident in the protocols that I've put in place, the people I've put in place, processes and stuff like that. It's like, wow, it's actually doing its job. Right. It's going to take a really long time to get to the point of the fishing trip. Right. So I mentioned the fishing trip. I don't think I talked about this on these.
I think you mentioned it, the elusive fishing trip, the shotgun fishing trip.
Yeah, the shotgun fishing trip. It's like you can really find out whether you run a business or a business runs you if you could get a phone call at 8 o'clock at night to show up for a plane to leave at 6 o'clock in the morning and be gone for 2 weeks and nothing happens to your business, right?
Or growth.
Nothing bad or growth
Yeah.
happens in that time period. And I haven't even got to the point where I'm comfortable enough to even test it. So like it's like whether that's confidence because of the imposter syndrome, or it's just like, maybe I'm being a little bit of a baby about certain things. I don't know. But, yeah.
Well, I mean, I ran that experiment. I remember it was on our 3-year removed honeymoon from our wedding, my ex-wife and I, and I was talking to one of my business mentors about going on this 11-day trip, and I was like, I don't think I can do it. And he was like, why would you not do this?
Yeah.
He was like, he said, you're gonna create a resentment in your wife that will live for decades if you refuse to do this. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna do it. And I prepared everything like in such a way that I look at it now and I'm like, what kind of a sick control freak was I, right? Like I had all of the tasks in folders for every employee while I was gone. Like this needs to get done. Don't forget about this. Don't forget about this. Don't forget about this. All the things that I thought that I was the only one that thought about them, right? And I went away and I came back and my business grew. And then we talk about an ego check, right? I walked in and I was like, how was everything when I was gone? And Joe, my manager, my GM at the time was like, great. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, everything was fine. We signed on 20 some more people and everything went great. And I was like, oh, I'm not that important. Right? And it was like, but that trip allowed me at that point to understand, one, to trust the other people around me and trust that I hired the right people, right? And two, for me to rest and, quiet my ego down a little bit and be like, I'm the solution to the problems, or maybe these other people can find better solutions to these problems rather than my problems, or me finding solutions to those problems. So I've been in some ways plagued by this for a long time. I did, there was a business mentor that was hired 6-7 years ago that came in and gave us this, what I would describe as a Tony Robbins-esque hoorah speech of why imposter syndrome is stupid and we should just shout affirmations in the mirror and write them in our mirror with dry erase markers and recite them every day. Hence using the law of attraction or visualization that those things will eventually come true. And that didn't work for me because like I told you before this video, I just feel like standing in front of the mirror saying, I will be successful. I will be financially free. I will be X. I will be happy. I will be whatever. Every time I read one of those, I could not believe it. Like my head was like, oh, well,
come on,
right? Or like there's that like 5% of me that's like, no,
yeah,
right? Because it's like the way my psychologist puts it now is like it's your unhealed brain or the undeveloped sense of self-worth and self-esteem that hasn't yet matured that will it's like a magnet kind of pulling you back. It's like, oh, I can achieve it. Oh, no, you can't. Right? You're not worth that. Right? So what the exercise that he did with me was phenomenal. So he was like, I like the idea of affirmations because it's rewiring some positive firing neurons in your brain, but I want to twist the verbiage. And he said, I also want you to do the same thing when you have these intrusive thoughts, right? Like you have like what kind of a dumpster fire happened in that 2-hour window when I was at the gym, right? So he was like, instead of saying the affirmations of like, I will be successful or I will be financially free, he said, I want you to write them out as if it's present, in present tense, 1, and 2, that they sequentially lead into each other. So, and instead of saying, I am this, because that gives you a very hard boundary to push against, because your brain can say, no, you're not, right? He said, say something like this. Instead of saying, I will be successful, you say, it's possible that I will be successful. And the next sentence, instead of I will be successful, you say, it's possible that I will be successful. And with the work ethic that I put in, it's possible that I will be financially free. And then you keep feeding, subsequently down those, when I'm financially free, it's highly likely that I will have more freedom with my time to devote to being a father. Right? And he said, when you shift your thinking in that direction, it's almost impossible to shut off, because you're not saying that it's concrete. I am this. You're just saying it's possible.
It's like you're just cracking open a door.
That's it.
And then you're opening it just a little bit more.
Just
with
a bit.
A little bit that you
Right.
say. Yeah, it's
So he goes, and then when you have these thoughts in your head throughout the day, these kind of self-deprecating, or like I'm not worth this, or maybe I'm not as good at this as I thought I was, or whatever it is. He said, I want you, and he said, this takes practice, which I completely align with and agree with, but to be present of your thought process is very difficult. But he said, when you catch those thoughts, right, once every couple weeks, you'll realize you're having one. He said, just stop for a second, write it down, and I want you to ask yourself, how is this benefiting me? That's it. Just write, how is this benefiting me?
right.
And is it true? And so I've been doing this
That's
for
like Socratic stuff there.
right. I've been doing this for like 16, 17 weeks or so. The thoughts that I write down, I look back at now, and I'm like, geez, like, put the weapon down, bud. Like, it's pretty self-abusive, right? And then, but the funny thing that I've noticed is that when I'm starting to write them and then write underneath that, is this truthful? And I just write yes or no. Or is this beneficial to my overall well-being? Yes or no, right? And I get more present of those thoughts. They stop coming, right? Because it's almost like you're taking the trash out by writing it down, and then you say, is this appropriate? Like, is this thought really something that should be occurring? Likely not, right? Is it benefiting me? No. Almost none of them are, ever. Sure. So like the dumpster fire thing of like, like I'm afraid to check my phone after I work out, because there's gonna be
a huge mess.
17 text messages, 8 missed calls, 35 emails, 20 upset customers. He's like, what if there aren't any?
Right. Well, that's the thing that those exercises have started to point out to me, which is like, well, am I doing enough if I'm not getting these phone calls? Right. Which is the opposite of what it should be. It's like, you did it right.
Right.
Nothing's going wrong.
Right.
But I'm like, there needs to be something going wrong. I'm not doing something right.
Right. Right. Well, it's the which probably lends into some childhood stuff for you of like you probably find comfort in chaos. Right? So it's like,
I'm cool-headed.
Like, wait a second, there's nothing going wrong? Like, this is not good.
This does not feel good.
It's like everything's okay?
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's like...
Yeah, what's really going on
like
that I don't know about?
Your shoulder.
Right.
Yeah.
So, which, I mean, the quote from Alex is my absolute favorite on this, because I can't subscribe to the belief of like the chanting affirmations and, dialed in perfect morning routine people that are seemingly to the public eye, i.e. on social media, perfect, right? But he's like, he said, my antidote to imposter syndrome is not to stand in front of the mirror every morning and shout affirmations at myself. He said, what I do is I build an undeniable stack of proof that I am who I say I am. And I do what I say I do. And that's it.
Yeah.
Right? He said, I could shout affirmations at myself all day long and nothing will ever change.
Right.
Right? But if I can build an undeniable stack of proof, not to other people, to myself,
yeah,
right? That if I say I will do this and I do it, he said that's another coin in the bank, right? That's how I combat that sense of imposter syndrome, coming from a dude that literally 8 years ago was bankrupt, and now has a personal net worth of about $250 million, right? So.
It's onto something there.
Yeah. So what do you think? That input from my psychologist was pretty impactful to me. It was pretty transformational, just overall in my general thought process of everything, with internal dialogue and all that stuff. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that I need to do a little bit of reflection and self-analysis, because the thing about me is I call it droning, where I'm just kind of like, I'm here to operate, bleep or bleat, like I get stuck in this mode, and I'm very, very focused on whatever it is that I'm trying to do, which is a superpower in some senses. Like, I will get to that goal. It doesn't matter if I have to smash the wall down to get there. I'll get there. But at the same time, I don't leave a lot of opportunity for me to be listening to my thoughts that are going on. They're just out there repeating themselves in the background, and it's like it's poisoning whatever path that I'm on, but I don't even know that it's happening.
Right.
So I need to do a little bit of self-reflection of that, because I catch myself. Other people will catch me. What did you say? Call it
Self-deprecation.
Deprecation. I was about to say self-defecation.
We're not sharding.
Self-deprecation. But I catch myself like, I'm an idiot. Say these things out loud. It's like, and those are small things, but they're stemming from much bigger things that are in the background. And so you catch myself on the negative self-talk, start to reprogram myself. I know that I'm not doing that actively. I know I'm not doing that, so it's something I should definitely get into.
It's super common, and I have a buddy in New Mexico that is like the most centered person I've ever met. Just like, I've never met somebody who's like genuinely always present in the moment, and it's something that he worked on tremendously. Was that kind of stuff, like, oh, I'm dumb, like that was dumb of me. Or I'm an idiot, right? And when I hear him say things now, I'm like, God, that sounds weird, right? Which is kind of heartbreaking to me, that the way that he says it now sounds weird to the self-deprecating thing that we're used to hearing.
Right.
But like, he'll mess up now, and he'll literally say something like, "Oh, I'm so fallible," and I'm like, "What?" Yeah. And he's like, "Oh, just made a mistake. Shame on me for being human." Right? And I'm like, but in my head, I'm like, that dude's got a really good relationship with himself.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I remember I was in my own recovery journey. I remember one of the group sessions that we had, we were talking about meditation and the value of meditation, but we were watching this. It was a guy that we had recently listened to a TED Talk from him, but it wasn't a TED Talk. It was something else. Yeah. But long story short, he talked about how he did a 6-month silence retreat with the monks in like Tibet, and 6 months in silence, right? And they did meditation for something like 18 hours a day. Yeah. The only breaks were to eat and to sleep, and the sleeping was very minimal.
Yep.
And the change in himself, he didn't understand while he was there, is when he was reintroduced back into
normal
population. But it's like, before, for instance, he'd be stuck in traffic, and he'd just be like, can't fucking, like the normal person, like, And when he came back, his responses were, "Well, I hope somebody's okay up there. I hope maybe I should call the authorities to make sure that they know what's going on up there." It's not that he was mad at his personal situation; he was caring for what was happening in front of him, right? And what was leading to this. So it's like there's some power in becoming present, and I understand that. I'm just not applying it, so I have to do it. That's we found something out in this session here that I'm not applying it. And to reflect back on Alex's quote that you said, that's very much what I've tried to do the majority of my life, is let my resume, so to speak, be the proof, or be the bank, or whatever analogy you want to use. I just sometimes ignore the stack and how high it's getting, right?
Yeah, or the validation you get is external rather than internal, right? Like that's the question my psychologist had for me was like, to me, you've built a pretty undeniable stack of something that demonstrating that you can do X, Y, and Z. He said, but we just got to get you to believe that. Right. And I was like, yeah.
As if what you did already wasn't good enough. It's
Right.
like, how do you believe that you did what you did? And
Right.
it's like, this is some conundrum
Yeah.
stuff.
Right. Right. So, well, sweet. I think that was a good, there's some digging that's going to come out of this one. So,
Yeah. I hope people watch all the way through and then start to at least use some humility and address some of the things in their life, because I got to do the same thing. So.
yeah. And maybe, embark some of those. I just gave away some very expensive advice from my psychologist that he would probably want you to pay for.
Right.
But, sorry, Paul. But hopefully it's useful to you guys, and hopefully you can be a little bit humble in looking at your own imposter syndrome or sense of worth not aligning with where your current state is. So we appreciate you watching, and catch you next time.
Catch you on the flip side.